Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. I'm going to level with you guys. I've been struggling the last little while. That is, struggling more than usual. I wanted to do something a little out of the ordinary and take this video to talk a little bit about it. I'm going to try not to just have this be a personal vlog or anything like that. I'm mainly doing this because from what I've been seeing, a lot of people have been struggling with similar issues, and I feel like it'll be helpful to critically examine some of these problems. Throughout this process, however, I hope you'll indulge me if I get a little bit raw about how some of these things have been affecting me. This year has been a particularly draining one for a number of reasons. For me, some of these reasons have been personal. I've made no secret about the fact that I've been working through my master's degree at the same time as taking care of the Primlet and keeping up with volunteer work and YouTube stuff. But I can't complain too much about that. It's all self-inflicted, and for all the pain and suffering I've been experiencing, I've also experienced a great amount of personal fulfillment and growth from it. But then two things happened that were not in my control: COVID and the protests. So here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to take the next few minutes to talk about how both of those things have impacted my life personally, for those who might be curious about some behind-the-scenes stuff. And then I'll post a timestamp in the low bar that everyone can skip to if they prefer not to hear personal stuff, and just want to go to the part where I actually make an analysis about how those situations have been impacting people more generally. So, when the news of COVID first began to leak out into the world, I was smack in the middle of my practicum, trying desperately to get as many hours for my course requirements as possible. I think the very first I remember hearing about it was in late December or early January. I remember looking at it and thinking, oh yeah, okay, the next SARS, I'm sure. The last few pandemics have all turned out to be a bit of a nothing burger, so I was going to reserve my concern for when things actually hit the fan. Then a few months passed, and here I am in late February, biting my fingernails clean off, wondering, am I going to be able to get to the end of my practicum before this thing shuts everything down? Is all of my progress so far going to be shut down? This has already been the most stressful 6 months of my life. I can't handle something, throwing all of it into question. For a very brief period, the provincial colleges were continuing to state that video counseling would not count as face-to-face counseling hours, so I was legitimately afraid that I wouldn't be able to finish my class. Then, in the span of, well, I think it was about a week, we found out, yes, video counseling will count, and then, actually, you don't even need to complete your hours anymore, you just pass. So it was kind of a whirlwind of emotions, because all of a sudden it went from fears of not passing to feeling like everything suddenly ending and feeling like I was not actually able to get proper closure on any of it. Then, of course, came all the weeks after in which we were told we have to socially isolate and stay away from other people due to how prolific the virus was. You're not allowed to see your friends or family anymore. Heck, it's not even safe to touch door handles anymore. Half of the things that my family and I used to do for entertainment involved going out shopping, going to the mall, and going out for dinner, and now all of these things have become hellscapes where you will definitely get sick and spread the virus to all your poor elderly relatives. I exaggerate a little bit, of course, but hey, not by much. So we duly acted responsibly and gave up almost everything to try and stay inside as much as possible, except for walks where we also avoided other people like the literal plague. Let me say, for trying to raise a baby that very much craves new and stimulating activities constantly, this has not been an easy task, and in fact, it has made all of my usual activities that I used to do for fun and relaxation a challenge. Suddenly, weekly hangouts with friends where we used to play games, and it would be an excuse for the baby to see other people and for me to unwind and socialize, have become exercises in frustration as I or my husband try to juggle her alone while talking to people on screens. Did I mention that she hates sitting in place for too long? Yeah. Rinse and repeat for 3 months straight. My father is dying to see his granddaughter. A few people I know are dealing with borderline alcoholism, struggling from social isolation, and I can't even arrange meetings with people outdoors 2 meters apart without experiencing some measure of guilt, like I'm doing something irresponsible. This despite every other house on my block having driveway hangouts seemingly every other day. And then the George Flynn death happened. I saw the video. It was pretty unpleasant to watch. This sparked the protests and the riots. You know, the large gatherings of people clustering together in the middle of that pandemic I was just talking about that separated me from my friends and family I so desperately missed. It also sparked the social media flood of racially charged messages, mostly from white friends, telling me every single thing I need to do or not do, or what I should read, or what businesses I should patronize, or how much of my money I should donate and to where, or what biases or privileges that I ought to be checking as a white person, or what I as a white person should be saying or not saying. The messages of people saying, if you don't believe exactly as I do, you are a horrible person, you are unsafe, you are a racist, unfriend me if you don't believe X and Y. These messages coming from people I knew were prone to similar messages in the past, but also from those who have not. These messages take many different forms. Some challenge things about the way I have been raised to believe that I have been treating people in an equal manner. That is, to treat people in the same manner regardless of their skin tone. And I've never been the sort of person to feel unconfident about my beliefs, but even I've found myself feeling more prone to the occasional thought, is there something I'm missing? Am I actually doing something wrong? Am I going crazy? And this on top of all the other stuff I'm dealing with right now. The finishing up my degree, the preparing to go back to work in a completely unfamiliar form due to the COVID stuff, the trying to juggle everything at once, the creeping, increasingly more powerful self-doubt, the frequent sleeplessness due to stressing over it all. It's just leading to this sense of emptiness and disconnect from the world around me, devoid of joy or passion that I once felt for all the things that I used to do. I've been seeing a lot of similar sentiments from people. The questioning, the self-doubt, the depression, the wondering what's real anymore. I think that there are several things that are contributing to this right now underneath the obvious main events of COVID and the protests. First of all, I think it's natural to feel a certain level of unease and uncertainty about the future living in a pandemic, to experience feelings of isolation and depression and of a longing to return to the way things were. Even anger that we're in this situation, anger that some people aren't taking this threat as seriously as they probably ought to, anger that one's livelihood is suffering and that there's nothing they can do about it. But it's more complicated than that. I think the easiest way to explain it is the fact that this virus is not as obviously devastating as something like the Black Plague was in the 1300s. The consequences of this virus are a little less clear. Still deadly, but primarily only to the elderly. Can sometimes cause additional health complications, but it sometimes doesn't. And the complications it can cause appear to be confusing and not always related to the respiratory system. These complications are so inconsistent that we really can't get a read on everything this virus is capable of doing. But for just enough people, the virus really isn't all that serious. To these people, and to those who haven't experienced COVID at all, just the devastating effects that it has had on their livelihoods, well, you can start to see where the unrest and frustration and anger might begin to bubble a little bit closer to the surface. This is especially true when you start to see people gathering en masse to protest. Now, they're protesting what is undoubtedly an important social issue, but now there's this mental tension going on where people may be feeling any of the following conflicting feelings. The right to protest is an important liberty that must be protected. Terrible injustices are happening that we need to stand against. What the hell is going on here? 1 week we can't go out in groups of more than 5 people, and the next we have people gathering by the hundreds? Is this virus a threat or not? If this virus isn't a threat anymore, then I just want to return to life as before. If the virus is still a threat, then these protesters are stupid and irresponsible for gathering like this regardless of the cause. Referring back to the video that I put out before this one, there's a lack of nuance in any of the way we're talking about these issues. We're not saying there are elements of these systems that are contributing to poorer outcomes for certain demographics of people that we should therefore address to create positive change. We're saying, these systems are racist and need to be abolished, and if you don't agree, you're also racist. All white people are complicit in racist systems. And similar kinds of statements that draw dividing lines and put people into distinct, separate, and opposing categories, rather than a collective working towards a common good. Polarizing statements that cause people to get defensive and feel like they have to agree with one side or the other. Sometimes it can be a bit more subtle, too. For example, there's a difference between saying that police brutality is a widespread problem and that police reform is necessary to address it, and that police brutality is a racial issue. There will be some people who will say that the first statement is avoiding the supposed main issue, but I argue that it isn't avoiding anything. It's targeting the behavior that we want to address and applying it to the whole population rather than just a portion of it. Unnecessary police shootings aren't any less bad when they happen to all of these groups either. You know, I think intersectionality as a concept was a well-intentioned one, but I think we're really seeing right now how it can divide people more than ever. You can talk about the struggles certain races may experience without having to make it about one race versus another, or without making broad generalizations about other races, but it seems like some folks are forgetting how to do that. For example, let's briefly look at the concept of white privilege. This is a notion that people have come up with to try to get people to check themselves and see how they might have unearned benefits that other people don't. But they're coming at the idea in a way that alienates and others people. They're taking an entire group and assuming a collective experience. That is, that they have not faced discrimination based on one external factor that none of them have had any control over. I mean, last I checked, making broad generalizations like this is kind of a bad thing to do, but I guess that sort of thing is okay, depending on who you do it to. And honestly, it's not even that I'm not comfortable self-examining and looking for ways that I might have a leg up over others. I mean, it's good to be appreciative of what you have, and if you're able to be able to help out the less fortunate. I think that if more people did that, we would live in a more positive, more connected, more altruistic world. But the problem is right now, this practice is being tied to one specific group of people. And even if we wanted to be extremely generous and say that the intentions were just about trying to address inequities and improve the world for everyone, it's instead just creating an environment of blame and division. How else would we be seeing people saying things like these in public without facing massive backlash? It's kind of funny in a way how, by saying there's a group that has all these privileges and benefits and doesn't face discrimination based on their skin color, they've actually made it so that people feel comfortable saying terrible things about them that they would never say about any other race, just because of their skin color. I guess life comes at you fast, doesn't it? So what we have now is a situation where, again, there is a legitimate issue worth challenging, but it is being heavily racialized and groups are being pitted against one another rather than working together. People are slinging around the term racist like never before, and on the one hand we have people, many of whom who have probably never engaged in truly racist behavior before in their lives, clamoring to apologize, admit their supposed racism, and promise to do better, whatever that may mean. And on the other hand, we have people putting their heads in their hands, looking at the ground, thinking, what are they talking about? How am I contributing to racism or racist systems just by existing? How does any of this make sense? And I think that much of it really doesn't make sense. For example, look at those who claim that merely being white is enough to be racist. What about those who didn't descend from American slave owners? What about those who immigrated from countries without a history of slavery? What about those who descended from slaves themselves? What about those who are literally being trafficked as we speak? It's not a productive and fair way of looking at the situation because it's not reflective of reality. Within the human race, there are people who are more fortunate than others, and there are people who are less fortunate. And the ways that people may be more fortunate than others will inevitably differ. And what one person might consider a more fortunate life outcome, another person might feel their own outcome is better for them, and two people might view an unfavorable outcome quite differently. None of any of this is tied solely to skin color. Not any good outcomes and not any bad outcomes. None of it. Again, I do invite people to self-reflect. Looking more deeply into your life situation is healthy. Looking for ways to better your life and the lives around you is wonderful and makes the world a better place. But I think that there are a lot of people trying to make others feel guilty undeservedly. I think the approaches being made to try and address problems are causing people to feel more divided. I think that there's a big difference between healthy self-reflection and being asked to apologize or atone for something that you have no business apologizing for. Call me an optimist, but I think that most people are, in one way or another, trying to lead positive lives. Many people want to get along well with others and to be able to contribute to a better world. Certainly in the Western world, I think we're very conscious of racism, and most people actively try to treat others fairly. So when we see messages talking about how racist we all are, it causes this mental discordance that we can't reconcile, especially when we think about people that actually engage in racist behavior, especially when we think back to the atrocities that resulted from overt racism. And even those who do try to apologize for something, they're often not appeasing the people accusing them of racism anyway. In fact, it just seems to be giving some people more license to discriminate in the other direction as an act of revenge. So, I think we should do a few specific things to try to rectify all this. First, I think we need to stop blindly accepting these terrible labels being thrown at us and stop apologizing for things that we did not do. The past is the past, and all we can do is to try to learn from it and make different choices. But we are not our ancestors, regardless of whether we descended from slave owners or not. Listen to others, explore other worldviews, try to understand and empathize, where appropriate of course, where people are coming from when they talk about their struggles, and feel free to offer as much help as you feel comfortable offering. But don't feel pressured to give help just because people are trying to guilt you into it. Again, especially for something that you did not do. Second, I think we need to keep an eye out for ways that we can make concrete and relevant changes to improve the lives of the less fortunate. And when I say relevant changes, I mean things that will actually make a difference to groups in need. So if your focus is more on changing the labels of syrup and rice packages rather than addressing the problem of fatherlessness or gang violence in low-income inner-city neighborhoods, you're more concerned with soothing your own pathological guilt complexes than actually fixing anything. And lastly, I think that we need to seriously reduce our time on social media, because this is one of the main vectors for all these toxic ideas to spread, and for people to be negatively impacted by messages more focused on stoking division than actually solving problems. It's a lot easier to say these kinds of messages into the void online than to look someone in the face and say it. As for myself, as I think is often the case, I've failed to take a lot of my own advice lately. This is partially due to the fact that I do have so much on the go and feel like I haven't been able to recover as quickly from this sort of thing as I normally do. But I think it's also just because of the timing of all these insane life events happening all at once. It really is just a lot for anyone to have to deal with. I'll be all right. This too shall pass. I hope that all of you are doing all right too. We're all going through this shit show together. On a more positive note, I did want to draw attention to an initiative that Cafe is doing right now. It's a video series called Cafe Take Two, and it addresses gender issues, current events and concerns, and talks about the work Cafe is doing and how you can get involved if you're willing. As you all know, I've been a supporter of Cafe, both with my time and the proceeds from all the videos I make for many years now. I so appreciate the work that they've been doing to bring attention to men's issues, and I feel like they are truly one of the most successful campaigns that we've seen so far to start actually getting some services for men in need. I'll post the link to the playlist in the low bar for anyone who's interested, and of course I will also include the links to help financially support them as well. And as always, any donations made to my channel, I donate a portion of these proceeds as usual. As I've talked about in this video, I may not be able to do a lot just yet, but I do what I can to leave the world a better place than before. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.